In the previous class, we discussed what is production, what is fixed proportion, what is variable proportion, what is the law of variable proportion, etc. Today, we are going to discuss returns to scale or fixed proportion or the long run production function. So in the previous class, what we have studied, that is the law of variable proportion or the short run production function. So today we will discuss long run production function. In the last class I told you that in the short run certain factors are fixed and certain other factors are variable. But in the long run all the factors are variable. We can increase the quantities of labor, machine, buildings. So all these inputs can be varied. So in the long run all factors are variable. So if you want to increase production in the long run, we can increase the quantities of all these inputs in the same proportion. We can increase the number of machines, number of buildings, number of workers. So all inputs are varied in the same proportion. So factor proportion remains the same. That is why the long run production function is called fixed proportion. Then why it is also called returns to scale? Why? Because see, in the long run when you increase the quantities of all the inputs in the same proportion, your scale of production changes. In the beginning, you will be producing on a very small scale, then medium scale, large scale, very large scale. So your scale of production is changing in the long run. So we are analyzing what happens to the output or what happens to the returns when the scale of production changes. That is why the long run production function is called returns to scale. So in short, we can say the long run production function describes the changes in output when all the inputs are varied at the same proportion. So what happens to the output when you increase the quantities of all the inputs in the same proportion? That we are analyzing with the help of long run production function. See, when all the inputs are varied at the same proportion, initially a producer will get increasing returns to scale, then constant returns to scale, and finally decreasing returns to scale. So here also there are three different returns to scales. That means when you start production, you will be getting increasing returns to scale. When you expand your production, after some times you will get constant returns to scale. And finally, you will be getting decreasing returns to scale. So what is increasing returns to scale, constant returns to scale, and decreasing returns to scale? One by one we have to analyze. See, increasing return to scale means in the long run when we increase all the inputs in the same proportion, output increases at a greater proportion. For example, if you increase all the inputs by 10%, the increase in your output will be more than 10%. That is increasing returns to scale. Similarly, constant returns to scale means when all the inputs are increased at a certain proportion, your output also increases at the same proportion. This is called constant returns to scale. For example, if you increase all the inputs by 10%, your output will also increase by 10%. That is called constant returns to scale. And at later stages of production, we will be experiencing decreasing returns to scale. That means when we increase all the inputs at the same proportion, your output will increase at a lesser proportion. That is called decreasing returns to scale. When you increase the inputs by 10%, the increase in output will be less than 10%. that is called constant return, decreasing returns to scale. Actually, we can represent this increasing returns to scale, constant returns to scale, and decreasing returns to scale with the help of a tool named isoquants, but that we will study later only. So properly these three returns to scale can be represented by isoquants only, so that we will do later. Now we are representing these three different returns to scales with the help of a symbolical diagram. So with that diagram, just we represent these three returns to scales. So for that we draw the x-axis and y-axis. Then we can see how we can represent these three returns to scales. See, in the x-axis we take percentage change in output. So in the x-axis we have to mark percentage change in output. And in the y-axis we take percentage change in inputs. So suppose we are drawing a 45-degree line like this. So from this we can say it represents which returns to scale. So this 45-degree line represents constant returns to scale. What about this one? This line represents decreasing returns to scale. And this one represents, this one represents increasing returns to scale. So the same diagram we can see here. So this is the diagram. Then we will see why there is increasing returns to scale, constant returns to scale, and decreasing returns to scale in the long run. When you are increasing the quantities of all the inputs in the same proportion, the reasons we will study later. Then, so why we are getting increasing returns to scale and decreasing returns to scale? Actually, increasing and decreasing returns to scale operates because of economies of scale and diseconomies of scale. So because of this only, we are getting increasing and decreasing returns to scale. Then what are economies of scale and what are diseconomies of scale? So first of all, we will analyze economies of scale. Economies of scale mean the advantages of large scale production. When you produce something on a large scale, there are certain advantages, or when you are producing on a large scale, that will help you to reduce your average cost of production. So what are these factors which help us to reduce the average cost of production? That we are analyzing. Economies of scale can be classified as internal economies and external economies. So what are internal economies and external economies? So we are discussing the reasons for increasing returns to scale. So increasing returns to scale occurs because of economies of scale, and economies of scale can be classified as internal economies and external economies. So what are internal economies? Internal economies mainly depends on the size of the firm, or these are the advantages emerge within the firm itself because of its large scale production. So the firm gets certain advantages because of its expansion from within the firm itself. That is called internal economies. So internal economies are entirely enjoyable by the firm itself. So since these type of advantages are emerging within the firm itself, so they can only enjoy that. So what are the different types of internal economies? The first one is labor economies. So what are the advantages in the case of labor? So labor economies means when there is large scale production, there will be a large number of workers. So we can apply division of labor. So that is an important advantage. So when there is division of labor, that increases efficiency and productivity of the workers. So the work will be divided into different processes, and each worker will specialize in one particular task. So he will become very efficient in that particular task. So as a result, his efficiency and productivity will increase, and the producer will get increasing returns to scale, or his average cost decreases because of the increase in productivity of the workers. Not only that, a large firm can attract more efficient workers. So they will get more efficient labor because large firms will be very reputed. So people are interested in working in such reputed firms. So they will get more efficient workers. So these are the labor economies. Then second one is technical economies. See, as a firm expands, it can use the latest technology and machinery. So a big firm, a large firm can use the latest technology and the machinery available. So that also increases the efficiency and productivity and helps the firms to reduce the cost of production. So mainly internal economies means what are the various things which help a firm to reduce the average cost of production. Not only that, in large firms there is linked process. Linked process means the production activities can be arranged in a continuous process without any loss of time. So we can see the companies which manufacture cars. So that is called a linked process. So from one stage to another stage in a chain it is moving. So there is no time loss. So that is linked process. This is possible only when there is large scale production. Then third one is managerial economies. So management is indivisible. We cannot divide management. So because of the indivisibility of managerial factors, when the number of units of output increases, the average managerial cost managerial cost decreases. So that is another advantage. So management cost decreases. Not only that, in a very large firm, the owner can appoint a production manager, marketing manager, human resource manager. So for different departments, different managers can be appointed. So this will increase the efficiency in management. So that is another advantage. This is possible only when there is very large scale production. Then fourth one is marketing economies. See, these are the economies in buying and selling. The buying inputs and selling the output. In the case of buying inputs or raw materials, the firm can purchase in bulk quantity. The raw materials and inputs can be purchased in bulk quantity. That help a firm to reduce the price of these inputs or raw materials. So it again enables the firms to reduce the cost of production. And another thing is that in marketing, large scale marketing will reduce the average marketing expenses. In big firms or in large firms, the large scale marketing strategies can be adopted, so that will reduce the average marketing expenses. Then fifth one is financial economies. See, a reputed firm means there is less risk in lending money to such reputed firms. So people will be ready to lend money to such large reputed firms even at a low interest rate. So this kind of large firms can mobilize their funds at a lower rate of interest that will help them to reduce the cost of production. Usually people may not be willing to lend money to a small firm because they cannot trust such small firms. But a large firm means they can trust, and as a result they will be ready to give their money at a lower rate of interest. So this is another advantage. Then next one is risk minimizing economies. See, in large scale production, risk can be minimized by the diversification of output and diversification of markets. So only a large firm can produce different types of products or different varieties of products. That is diversification of output. So that is also possible in the case of large firms. So these are all various instances of internal economies. So in this way, a firm can reduce the cost of production. Then next is external economies. External economies means gains available to all the firms in an industry from the growth of that industry. So an industry means the firms or the group of firms which produce the same product. So when the industry grow, there will be certain advantages to all the firms in that industry. This is because of the growth of the industry. So what are the different ways in which a firm can get advantages by the growth of the industries? External economies mainly emerge because of the localization of industry. Localization of industry means the firms will be located at a particular place, around a particular area, all the firms in that industry will be located. So because of that, they have certain common advantages. So what are these advantages? So the first one is economies of localization. See, when the firms are located in one particular area, see, in that area there will be the availability of skilled labor, and there will be the provision of better transportation facilities, etc. The availability of raw materials. So these are all the advantages of localization, because there will be very high demand for the labor which is used by that particular industry. So as a result, there will be more availability of that kind of workers in that area. Similarly, the inputs, then when more firms are located in one particular area, in that area the transportation facilities will improve. So these are all advantages or economies of localization. Then second one is economies of information. See, when the firms are located in one particular area, they can jointly conduct research. That is one advantage. Then they can share statistical, technical and other information. So there will be sharing of information or data. So all this kind of advantages arises because of the localization of industry. Then third one is economies of vertical integration. See, when firms are located in one particular area, or when there is growth of the industry, there will be the establishment of subsidiary industries. Subsidiary industries to this industry means that may supply certain things which are required by the industry. For example, in an area where the textile firms are located, new subsidiary industries will develop and they will supply chemicals which are required by the textile industry for coloring purpose. So that is an example. Then next one is economies of byproduct. See, when the firms are located in one particular area, there will be the availability of waste materials in large quantity. So sometimes new firms may develop, they may make use of this waste products of the firms in this industry, and they will produce new items. So that is economies of byproduct. So these are all advantages because of the localization of industry, because of the growth of industry in that particular area. So these are external economies. But when production goes beyond a certain level, what happens? There will be some disadvantages also. These disadvantages of large scale production are called diseconomies of scale. Diseconomies of scale. So diseconomies of scale means disadvantages of large scale production. That means when production is exceeding a certain limit, some disadvantages or some kind of problems may arise. Because of that, the average cost of production starts increasing. These disadvantages are called diseconomies of scale. Then what are the important type of disadvantages when production increases beyond a certain limit? The first one is difficulties of management. When production increases beyond a certain limit, what happens? some kind of problems arise, especially the management becomes very difficult. Supervising the workers and all, it will be very difficult. So when there is inefficient management or supervision, that may leads to wastage. And mismanagement and wastage, then when there is mismanagement and wastage, the average cost of production will increase. Then another problem is difficulties of coordination. See, in a very large firm, there will be different departments, production departments, purchase departments, finance department, etc., etc. So there will sometimes there may be problems of coordination between these departments. So lack of coordination between these departments, that also creates problems, and that may leads to inefficiency and increase in the cost of production. Then next one is difficulties in decision making. See, in a large firm, before taking a decision, they have to consult different departments, so decisions will be delayed. So that is another problem. So quick decisions cannot be made in a very large firm. That is another problem. Then communication problem. See, in a large firm, when the top management takes a decision, so it will be, this will be communicated to the lower levels. It is very difficult to communicate such decisions to the lower levels, because the communication also will take place at a different levels, from top management to their subordinates, from the subordinates to supervisors, then supervisors to the workers. So there will be lack of proper communication. That is another problem. Then labor diseconomies. See, when there is extreme division of labor in a large firm, there will be division of labor, and when there is extreme division of labor, there will be an impersonal atmosphere in the firm, because there will not be much contact between the management and the workers. So this may lead to industrial disputes. So that kind of personal contacts are not between the management and the workers, so some problems may arise. So they are called labor diseconomies. Then another problem is scarcity of inputs. When there are a large number of big firms in a locality, there will be scarcity of factors. All the firms will demand the inputs, and sometimes they may face the problem of scarcity of these factors. Not only that, there will be competition between the firms to get these inputs and their labor. So this may increase the price of inputs and the wages of workers. So that is the problem of scarcity. Then the last one is marketing diseconomies. So as I told you, there will be very stiff competition between the firms, and because of that, they have to spend huge amounts on advertisement and other kind of sales promotion activities. So this also increases their marketing expenses as well as the average cost of production. So that much only about the long run production function, then the reasons for increasing and decreasing returns to scale, or what are internal economies, external economies, and diseconomies of scale.